ראש חודש תמוז, תש"ס, המשך תרע"ב, Beis, חלק א', מים הדיבר המסחיל אצלי אומין, שבועס תרע"ד, עמוד תס"ב. Right, so I think we're holding in the introductory perik, about halfway down the Omid of Tosam Beis, I think. And we saw that the posik from Yeshaya Novi, Hashem Elokai Ato, Aromimcho, and Oide Shmecho, and then we saw that the hemshech of the posik was, how's it written over there? Ki asisa pele, eitzeis mirochik emunas oimei. So we saw at the beginning of the posik that was a nevuah that Yeshaya made ke'ein hagdoma to the nevuah which appears after that, which is the bittul of the malchus of Noiga. In other words, the bittul of Klolasinian Noiga, and it's moving mizeh, shali day bittul Noiga, that the unique, the Gimel Klippus that Tamuz would become botel. We saw that that was the union of Havaya Elokai, Oide Shmecho. We saw that that was the Oide was the union of Amshoches, Atzmus Ein Seif. Oide was the union of Hoidoa, and it also indicates, as we saw, the union from Amshocha, but it was the union of Amshoches Chodosh. In other words, Mamish Atzmus Ein Seif, and the Amshocha was all the way down into Malchus, where that's the union of Oide, Oide Shmecha, and Hashem Elokai, that's the union of the Eser Spheres, the Atzilas, of the hemshech of the posik indicates the hamshocha of chodosh, and we saw that that means mamish me'atzmus or that's never been be oifen shel ha'orazeh b'kol ha'ishtaushus ad koi. And we saw that in order for it to be that hamshocha, there had to first of all be a halacha. That even though we're talking about hamshocha atzmius, mamish from the atzmas, nonetheless there has to be a haloah mitzad the mekablim, and also the union from aromimcho. L'roi meim kloves eishtaushlas, v'atzmus ein seif, alidei zeh nimshach ha'er chodosh. Shezeh inyan oide shmecha, the oide, we saw that was the union for gilui v'amshocha, and it goes all the way down into shmecha, alidei zeh here bittul malchus the Noiga. In other words, if there'll be mizgale or mamish mea atzmus hispora, then that'll be mevatel b'derech mamera, or the whole union of Noiga, because Noiga is the union from Achziza mitzad the hergesh ha'matzias. But if there's a bittul from atzmus ein seif, mamish begolui in malchus, then there's no Achziza to the union of Yeshus Matthias Cloud. Mamira, the union from Noiga will be battle Mi'atzmei, and then it'll be Meir, the union of Kedusha, what Kedusha is Bittul Amiti, L'Rotoine Vele, Elakusa Yisbora. Ve'achachach, Mavaya Oifen Hamshoch, the Ere Chodosh, B'mesha Oimer, Ki Osisa Fele, Eitzeis, Merochek, Amunas Oimei. And we saw that the union of Asisa fell, but that's referring to the union of Chochmah. The Isa Bazoiha, Shom in the Zohar Pasha Achri, where it brings this whole quote from that and teaches out that posik, Ki Asisa fell, and we saw Kesuya Olavusha li Islabsho, Nahira Oli Islabsho, Ola Halbish Latui. Nahira Stima Atiko. והיינו כמו שהחוכמה אלה לגבי הכסר ומעלמס es הכסר. We saw Beklolis, the question we had about the mamutza, and we saw the Chokhmah Stimor was the mamutza. So the maskana that we reached in the drushim was that Chokhmah Stimor Atzmei has in itself two tnues or two oifanim. That there's even the Chokhmah Stimor is oile legabit inyan hakeser, and it's literally malim al inyan hakeser. But we saw that that's not a inyan what keses mislabish in it, but it becomes manitvi akisui, as we saw, and levush not bederach hislabshus, no levush atzmi to the nohera stimoa of atika. And we saw that that was a inyan which was really the atzmus of moicha stimoa atika, but it was a min helem as a Gabi the Makablim, that Ki'ilu it comes in the form of a Ayin, not me Inyan Etzem Dov HaMlubish boy. About the whole marshal over there, what reveals a Kas Libnei, but that's really just another Labush Li Gilui HaAv. It's a Gilui to the Inyan of an Av, Atzmi is Mamish, as who are din when I get to that Kisui of the Inyan of Chokhmah Stimor, it's a Kisui Atzmi, not just a Inyan from Levush Amalim. And therefore we saw that that's one Tnua and Aliyah in the Inyan from Chokhmah Stimor. And then we saw that there was another Inyan in Chokhmah, that's what we're going to deal with now in the coming period more, that Chokhmah Stimor is Yoired, as it were, or Alchoponim, it's Meya Klapi Mater, and it becomes a Mokir for the Inyan of Chokhmah Geluya Da'atzilas. So on the one hand, it's a Helem to the Inyan HaKeser, it's Marlim Etzem HaKeser Atzmei, or it's a Mokir Chokhmah Geluya. But albeit that's also not Mamish B'derach Hishtaushlas, Ve'ilevolo, it's also B'derach HaChokhmah Me'ayin Timotzei, of Al Chaponim, it's a Mokir clearly to the Inyan of Chokhmah Geluya. So that's the Mamutza. So on the one hand, Teila Klape Keser, on the other hand, it's Yored and it's a Mokir Klape Chokhmah Geluya. So now we were just giving a brief chazorah on the whole concept of the Kisuya to Nohera Stima Atika, Kamoish Anu Reim, the Mishuhu B'Moichin the Gadlas, B'Yachelte, in other words, Moichin the Gadlas, is the Etzem Moichin Be'atzmo, Eik Shahim Mekablim Mamish, from the Inyan Chokhmah Stimor, which is the Inyan from Koyach HaMaskil. In other words, the Amitis are Moichin Beli Ko Inyan from the Yerida to the Midas. Amisha B'Moichin the Gadlas, B'Yachelte Lahalim Esatainu, Afilu Tainu Gatzmi. We saw that one of the greatnesses of our Chacham Amiti and our Chacham Godel was that he was able, with his Chachma, to be literally Malim Al Inyan Oine Shaloi. In other words, that even though it might be Makabo Basura or a Inyan which is Megala to him Oinig Nifla, no Oinig B'derech Pele, instead of revealing to those around him the Inyan of these pilots and the Gilui HaOinig, no, he's able to be Malim that B'tachlis HaHelem Belisha Yasimu Lev El Belisha Yivati Be'atzmei Es Goydel Oinig. And we saw that that's the Inyan of that Kisuya mitzad the Inyan from Moichin. However, that's Moichin the godless stuff. Because somebody was Moichin the katnas and he's mispoil mitzad the midas becholdo, becol Inyan who nimmt to be pilots. So the Rebbe V'zeu mipnei sha'chochma he tainu be'etzema husa. And that's what we saw by Emshech Habiyu over there, that the koyach ha'chochma is b'emes the Inyan von Oinig. Rach shebo b'muhus acher b'koyach ha'chochma. Avo b'emes muhusai u koyach ha'atainu. In other words, we saw the beer in the Drushim Ben Time over there, that the Inyan of Chochma, how is it able to be Malbish Pinyan there, as Inyan ha'oinig? it becomes a kisui to the union of oining of another slapshes. No, Ayin von kisui mitzad etzem a tainug atzmei. It's kilo that the tainug itself is mechase al atzmei. That's what the Rebbe is malbid, that the union of the moichin the gadlus, they are really hainu hach. They are really the etzem koyach ha'oinig. And it's the koyach ha'oinig itself is kilo malim al atzmei, was able to be oitzeres atzmei, v'toich atzmei, and it's mishkale in a mahus acher, which is called the union of chokhmah. And therefore we saw that the union from chokhmah is, when the mentions against the union from kilo chokhmah, filo in the union of the lower madrigas in chokhmah, which is the kudas askola, then we see that he's in a state of oineg, and he's lit up. The famous Meiser with Rabbi Avu, that Tza'avu Ponim, Rabbi Avu, Motzah Tesefta Chadat, that lights him up and is, shines Chokhmah Sodom. Toya Ponim Vafila, that's Mitzar, the Indian of an Aliyah, he stalks kilo into the Indian of Aoinig, the Indian of an Aliyah, and almost what we might call the Iskal is in the Gedar Oinig, and that's because in Emerson the Indian from Chokhmah is the Mahusa Oinig. Huh? No, we didn't say Eina Etzem. No, on the contrary. We didn't say the Ein Loshon Kazer, Eina Etzem Mechas Al Atzmei, Ein Bitui Kazer. It's just written that Eina Etzem, Etzem Eino Mishkale, Veino Mishpashet. Ein Loshon Kazer, Eina Etzem Mal Malatzmei, Ein Dvar Kazer.
But that's Ein Dvar Kazer.
Ein
Dvar Kedush, Eina Etzem Masir Atzmo.
No, I'm saying that you're quoting a Loshon which doesn't exist. There's no such Loshon. Eina Etzem Mali Malatzmei, Ein Dvar Kazer. No, on the contrary, only the etzem is able to be Ma'ila Maratzmei. Only the etzem can be Ma'ila.
Why don't they say you can't cover your hair?
That's under Parshas. That's another in that the etzem can't kilo be Mamish Ayin von Helen Vehester. He was saying not Helen Vehester. That's what we pointed out. We're not talking here about Helen Vehester. We're talking about that the etzem inyan of Chokhmah Stimua is inyan atzmi, and it gains the same helim atzmi that the oinig has, and it covers over the inyan von oinig by being what in effect the oinig is. Or not that it's a dover ha'maylim or mastim or the von oinig. That's what we've been learning here the whole time. And that what eina etzem malim ala etzem is a besonder ma'aser. That's what you quote about. That's what you quote about that means that something which is balavochi, the same etzem, can't prevent the etzem from being begolui. You follow? Can't stop the etzem from being begolui. And here we're not saying that it stops the etzem from being begolui. What we just mean is that it becomes in the same form, just like the etzem is not begolui, which are the definition, that it's also like that. In other words, that it's a kisui of it's not a slapshus. That's what we've been learning all the time. And it's only a kisui legavidame makablim, and that's what we saw. That the Indian at the whole Indian of the Golas and all those Inyonim are not really a emasa Indian from Esther. They're just really they're a gilui atzmi of the Einig, but because of that gilui, it's like we gave a dogma to it. The Indian at the Yisurim, which are brought down in Perek at the Yisurim, they come to the Odom, they are be'emes mitzad the Indian from Ein Sof Eik Shehu. It's just like Gavi, the Makablim, you can't really see it. In Emerson, that's a Gilui, Etzem Bi'atzmei. But the Makablim are not able to be Makabel, therefore it's a Shlila by Zay. That's what the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya. Over there, Perek in Mamere, says the Rebbe says, "U'kemoi shanu roim the mishu b'moichin the gadlus And that because Chochmah is be'emes tainu be'etzema Mahusa. Rak shebo b'Mahusa acher b'bchinas HaChochmah. Avu be'emes Mahusai hu koyach tainu. Therefore, it's not over Hamaylim, das ist Mamish Hainu Hach. Das ist Mamish Tainu Atzmai. And it's just that it comes in the form of Amahus Acher. So, what is the Bibazim? What is the touch that the Chochmah becomes a Mahus Acher, and yet nonetheless it's the same meaning. It's the same meaning over this Amahus Acher. The Derish Bio, was it a pshat for them? In other words, it really, mitzad echad Chochmah is another Ayin, and he calls it a Mahus Acher. And here he said it's not, he says Koyach HaOinig. It's Koyach HaOinig. So how can it be kilo, it's Mamish Koyach HaTainig, and it's a Mahus Acher, and that will be the pshat that it's a senior from the Lavush. The fact that the Shaila was a Indian with it. That as we're going to see a bit further on in the coming chapter, we're going to see when we get to another Indian. That ultimately speaking, the Indian, the Atzmus, today's time, in Yoni is that he wants to be Megala in Yoni. The Sokosot is an Indian fan, Kaviohu. Chofet Chesed, or even Lomayla mi Chofet Chesed. Even that he called Chesed, Rav Chesed, or Chesed Atzmi, that the etzem meaning of the Atzmus demands a Indian show Gila, that there has to be the other entity, like it's brought down in some over the Bariches, the whole time after Bria begin the Ishtamiden Bay. It's brought down in the Zohar that he wants something should know him. Is in order for somebody to know him, then there has to be a something. Is a miracle to us that the Indian, the being is something to know him. Das is a Indian in the etzeminen of the Atzmus, a kilu. There couldn't have been the ultimate, what you might call tainu, or ultimate einig, ultimate shleimus. Even though you can't say such things, be'emes, or that's what we have to say. That there had to be the other entity, and the other entity should come to know him and be misbattled in him. So you can't really have another entity apart from the Abish. It's not a child. And that what there is another entity, well, that's all a sheker. The whole thing from Malchus Tatzilas, what it brings about the Yesh and Elam Abriya, and also Dovabilti Emes. How do we say? That the whole meaning from the Yesh is a Dova Hamalim, it's a meaning from Sheker B'Emes. Deeper Yesh, a Matzir. That's all part of the mishchak, which ultimately comes out, as you might call it, at the other end. But everything has to start in the Atzmus, Kaviohu. In the Atzmus, Kaviohu, there has to be what we call Koyach HaOineg. And we see that in Koyach HaOineg, we talk about Oineg HaAtzmi, and Biz Oineg HaPoshut, Sheba'atzmus, Leosid Lovis, he brings down in some of all, Oineg HaAtzmi, Shebe'Poshut, Sheba'atzmus, Shebepshitas HaPoshut, HaTainug HaChais, all sorts of amazing Lashonas over there when they get to the Tainug HaAtzmi. And remember, what is Oineg? Oineg is mitzad echad Ayin, which is in the, he'll soon say it, Mamish, in the coming chapter, in a second, he'll soon say it. The Ayin from Oineg is Ayin which is Aliyah, V'Kavalas, in the Eter. That's the Tnua from Oineg. When you're Misanig, Rosh Shabbos Oineg, you come to the end of the Am Shocha, but then the Tnua, V'Chazor is Ayin from Oineg. The Ayin from going back Kaviyol into the Eter, and that's the Ayin from Oineg. Amamir, the Eivsa made as Azach in his Atzmas, we call it a Tainug HaAtzmi, a Poshut, Mitzad HaAtzmas, the Kaviyohu, he should be Misanig, Pirush Ador, that there should be another Kaviyohu entity, because that's what Tainug implies, and that should be Choiza, B'Teichat, Atzmusay, and that's Kilu Neisen, the Ina, that's Kilu Mashlim, the Ina Vanoineg. Amamir, Mitzad Echad, that's only him himself. Or mitzad sheni, he's nice and mock him that there's kilu, another in which is not separate from him, that's a mamish, as it were, betoich atzmus, nonetheless, kaviyohu, it's like a mishchach, that there's a in which is greater mo'inig, and that is choyze betoich. Oh, that's the trick of oinig, so be'emes it's not a dova nivdal mimenu, on the contrary, it's choyze miskalel, misdabik betoich atzma. That's what the Rebbe says here, that the inyan from Chochma, the koyach ha-Chochma is like the ultimate expression of that inyan. That the inyan of Chochma is that it becomes mamish, as it were, the other Matthias, and that begins this whole Seder, which will eventually make the trick, that he would kilo make the inyan from the yesh. Although that Chochma is really the inyan where the whole thing began. What does it the inyan oinig? And it's only how the oinig, not the oinig is mislavish in a lavush. It's only how the oinig puts on as a cover that it's going down towards the mekaber over an emerson is ainuhach. It's mamish the same thing, and that's what he brought down from the Zayr. It's a kisuya lialbosha. It's not a inyan for helim, and it's not a inyan for the slapshes in a dova hamalim. No, there's a kilo amin hagshoma of the etzeminin kamoishu going down towards this whole idea that there should be mamish, as it were, a makaber. But in the mochiv shorish ain't the it's all him. That's what he brings in mitzvah salod and mitzvah sechadim and the esses filas agger. There's a filas agenuzes. What he's mother, the esses filas agenuzes are really tmuni b'teicha atzmas ve'in lehem matzias klalu. Klau. And the only way we are mo'ira din is through the in of what we call kriya. If you call kaviyohu shema is v'nochazach inyanim, then you mo'ira that inyan b'toich atzmusay. And he watches that's a bliss that kaviyohu the Eivsha made mit this whole tzchok that he got eventually. Tzchok also the Elokim the inyan from there. And tzchok also the Elokim Ayin. It's a tzchok. It's not really an amitis. It's not really a mitzvah. Matthias Klau or Klau.
What's the difference between a kisui and a levush?
Huh?
A kisui and a levush. What's the difference?
The difference is that when you have a levush, then you mislavish in the levush, and the levush is a doazar, and the inyan a mislavish boy is an inyan sheni mimeno. And the dos is mislavish in dos. But what I said is it's not Peter levush. Now the etzem thing itself just becomes another inyan, so that it looks a certain inyan, like Gaviyu, but it's not a levush. That's the inyan itself, made itself, as it were, look in a different oifen. And that's called kisui. And that's what he was masbid in the previous memory. That's what he's masbid. Amamela, that's the inyan of the inyan from Chochma, how it is. I feel Chochma Agluya, that's what we're going to see in the coming chapter.
Kasui is also the verse that is mitkaseh.
Huh?
Kasui, who betzem also mafut.
Yeah.
Kasui.
So none of mine is brought down in the Kisui result that even kisses are lavush. Oh, but that's another. That's maybe in the same way. Yeah. Well, we're talking about Chochma. We're talking about Chochma's timur, not about the inyan. On the contrary, we're saying that Chochma's timur is that inyan legabi keser. Legabi keser, and in keser gufa legabi pnimis keser. Amamela, that's what he was masbir earlier. That the inyan from koyach ha'oineg is koyach ha'chochma. That's what he said. And koyach ha'chochma is really just tainuk be'etzem mohusei. So I saw the shadow, how can it be? That's what I've been trying to be masbir now for the last few minutes. How can we have a inyan that's on the one hand called a mohusach, it's called chochma, not tainuk. And on the other hand, you say the whole inyan of it is oin. Well, that's what I was just masbir, that the whole inyan has to start somewhere, that kaviyohu, the Eivsha begins, mitzad this unbelievable hechreach, we don't know what it is, that there should be eventually, as it were, another entity. Yeah, but there can't really be another entity apart from him. Remember, he makes inside himself the inyan of inig, which is on the one hand, the veikis valiyah, b'toich atzmei, and yet at the same time, it gets the inyan of another face that looks klapei, the makablim to be another inyan. And that's the inyan, what he means here. It's a kisui legabi the. It's not a inyan from lavush. That's not a inyan from lavush, but that's a helam in the etzem gufa. That the etzem makes itself appear, and So, b'milim acheres, but that means that just like the etzem is by etzem definition, moved out, mikol inin agilui, then that's also got that trace in it, that it's also moved out, mikol inin agilui, and therefore chochmas timah, the way it is in that madrege is moved out, mikol seider hishtaushus lagamri. And in order to go down, it has to be a from parasum, and that's all. That's the Mokiv assurance of the whole inyan of what we see is eventually becomes the Bria. What eventually becomes the Bria is Kilo Amishchak B'Teicha Atzmas, that he makes on the one hand a Dover HaKol B'Teicha, which is Oineg, which we call Oineg considers, and that Oineg begins to produce what it's going to be really Masonic from. That the Oineg itself produces what it's going to be Masonic from. And that's the difference, Lamaila. Oinig Lamata, there's a mensch, I think what the mensch is Masonic from, therefore all the Oinigim, how they are by us, Sof Oinigim Amulkovim Beis Ador. I feel in the Union Oinig B'Teicha Etzem HaOdom, also Mulkov Beis Inyan. Lamaila ain't okay. Lamaila, the Indian from Chokma, is how the Eivster makes Kavioch, the Dor, that he's Masonic by, from the Etzem Oinig itself. That the Etzem Oinig itself produces the Dover HaMasonic by. That's the Indian from Chokma. Amamira, he says that that's why it is that Mishi Eshloi, Lamosha Lamata, the Indian from Moichin the Godless, then he's able with his Moichin and the Oinig to be in one Matthias. He can have the Oinig Betachlis, and it says we're all part of his Moichin, and you don't notice the difference, Klau. וזהו מפני שהחוכמה היא התיינון בעצם מהוסה, רק שבו במהוס אחר, בכוח החוכמה, אבל באמס מהוסה הוא כוח התיינון. And therefore we saw that by Rabbi Avuhu, when there was a Gilead, the Indian from Chochma, then, how do you call it, Tov Upono, that affected the whole of his materials, because that's the Indian for the Aliyah, Istalkes. B'Teicha Etzem, Amamira, the Etzem is Kilumeya, the whole Matthias of the other. And that's the Indian of Amitius Achochma. V'alkein, Yesh B'Koyach Achochma, Lahalim Alatainu. But once again, it's not a Indian from Mahelem Derech Lavush, but that's the Etzem Kilu appearing in another form. וזהו בחידש חוכמס תימוה, דלפעמים הוא אלה, ולפעמים יורדת, and that's the ממוצע. והיינו, לפעמים הוא מסלמס, ולפעמים יורדת לי יש מוקה אל הגילוי. So when she's מסלמס, well that's this in that she becomes a kisuya. The Indian from Chokmas Timo is mamish part of the Indian HaKeser. It's part of the Yechoilas of the Keser to be miskale. But on the other hand, that's already the beginning of the Indian Agiloi. Olefiyomim yoredes, vaino lefiyomim misalemus, olefiyomim yoredes liyesh moke ela giloi. Or that what it's yoredes, but that's when Chokmas Timo becomes a moke el Chokma Giloi. Okamoishi hi misalemus lamaila, harehi malemus el hakeser. And once again, it's not the pshat that she's milam, but derek lavush with the whole arichas. No, it's bederek kisui the shinui haponim bilva. The oz achochma nikra pele. Darei hakeser hu b'chinas pele. The alkein kasher achochma malemus al hakeser gam hi nikra pele. That's also part of the whole beer that it's not a lavush, because a lavush is a dovazar. If the lavush is malim and keser, the lavush is not keser. It's not the same madreg as keser. And remember the fact that the lavush itself is called pele, it's called the same inyan as keser, is a symbol that it's basically the same inyan as keser. What Lafiza comes is that really the whole inyan of mokir, of Helem Vagilui are really Beshor Shema Amiti, they're all inyan. They're all inyan echad. Because it couldn't say that the inyan of the Mocha de Gili is the Kaviochel the Tainu, that inyan of the Hisoirus Achesed, the being of. And the inyan which is malim on that, in order that there should be the beginning of the creation, is really the same thing. It's Etzem Minyone, how he doesn't Kaviochel allow the Gili to go to Ganser Ja, der ganze Weg. Aber not, there's a Dover Hamalim, a Dover Zah, which is Utzer, the Inen of the scholars. Remember, Nimtzul, if he said it, Beshorshom, the Inen von der Helm, and the Gilui, Amamishainu Hach. Remember, that's Yesh Leima, that's in a sinus mokim of Havaya Velakim Kula Chad. Do we say that Havaya Velakim Kula Chad, that the Koyach Gilui and the Koyach Helm are really Mamish Inyan Echod. And it's not just the shot that the Inyan von Elohim helps the Inyan von Havaya. But that's one of the beauties is that if it weren't for the Inyan von Shem Elohim, yeah, there wouldn't be any Gilui at all, yeah, because of the mileage of the Ramim and so Eter. Or Havaya Velakim Kula Chad, the Pshat, B'Shorshom, they're really one and the same, yeah, they're one and the same Inyan Kipshutei. Amami, that's the Inyan Achochma. And therefore we see that on the one hand the Inyan HaChochma by the Adam, on the one hand the Inyan HaChochma is Reishis HaGilui, yeah, he begins to be Yoyred Klapi Atzmei, and here on the other hand, those are the Tatlis HaAliyah V'Dveikis in the Adam, Atzuvenu Yodea Klau what he's really got. He doesn't really know Klau what he's got until it goes down to the Lama Madregas, but then he begins to have some appreciation of what's the gehabt in the Inyan in the Inyan von Chochma, until it reaches a Madrege von Adi Shteimim Keriga Chodo. It is brought down that when he heard a particular Inyan, he just went into a state of Shteimim and silence and bittul mikol mahusei klau klau. So it's not the pshat that he didn't have what to say. It's not the pshat that he couldn't talk. He was just oiling to us our dog. Were all those inyonim are not shaya klau klau. Amamir mitzadechad it's in from helem ha'atzmi, and those are the pshat in Siddur Salomo. The lotion helem ha'atzmi. Was it helem ha'atzmi? Was it the pshat? Was it the pshat that the atzmi himself he is the helem. Tafki mitzad goydel ma'alos he's the helem. Mitzad zeh kommt is that's like we saw in the end of that truce. Where was it? In the not the previous but the one before. We saw that the whole Inyan for the Golas is boy from Kozeh. In one moment, yeah, you can just be potter from the ganze Shemi Yibona Beis Hamikdash b'Meir v'Yomeinu. That upshot in 1 minute he can just show the emes upon him. How do you call it? Just they used to just give him a flick. And those are the Inyan von Herav Ayin, and the whole thing will just switch, and it'll be Gilui Atzm Satayin or Glamatim and the ganze Inyan.
What are we waiting for?
Oh, exactly. That's exactly what we don't know. What are we waiting for?
What causes, he said, the whole thing depends whether Hakmas Tamuz is Ole Yored. If Hakmas Tamuz Ole is the Gremet Ahelam. If Hakmas Tamuz Yored is required Gilui. And what causes Hakmas Tamuz?
I don't know, my boy. If I knew, then I could open up an office. If I knew the beer in them, I could open up the office. For what is it to say? At this particular moment, yeah, we're holding by that Inyan where it's all in even from heaven, as it were. Yeah, it's all in that. Even Kemosh say you read it, it's Kilo Boim Kozeh, the Tchilosai, and the Roisha Elin of the Momotze is Takadehela. The Inyan von Leosid Love is that's all going to become bottle. You follow? And it's a Zayin, Yud K and Vav K, all one Inyan. And it could be Yiyeh will be Vav K. And so the Shem of Vai will be Yiyeh. Leosid. That's Svetai. Yeah, so you didn't say they've had enough of a Svetai. Yeah, and they want a Zolzai, which also lost Nazi. All right, so that's briefly a look at the whole Inyan that we had Adkoi. So now comes along the Rebbe, and now he's going to come down the ladder, but he's going to show how all these Inyanim Atzmim are in the Inyan, how it comes down the ladder. Oi Chom Bazoya. In that in Pasha Asri, where he talks about this posik, Havaya Lakai, Asisa, how do you call it, Arumimcha, Asisa Felem, the whole Inyan. So to give it to Zohar Kodesh says over there, Dova Acher, another pshat. Now you have to realize that wherever the Zoya or Rashi or anybody uses the expression Dova Acher, then the kavanah is to say another pshat, another inyan, shoiner in its content than what was before. Aber le'idoch, to in some way correct Ayin, which in the first pshat that is better, as it were, through the inyan. It's like in thesis, you have that sometimes. Dr. Good tells, and then he says, "Oy Shloima," or something like that. Yeah, and the lashonos that they exist. Well, then it's one on. Or the Gemara says, "Yeah, kach v'kach," and it says, "I boyes ema." If you want to say kach v'kach, and as you do it, the Rambam paskins according to the I boyes ema. One of the biurim is that if the Gemara said I boyes ema, the teacher wanted to bring out a new inyan, but a mile in that inyan, like what was said before. So if that's already a mile like what was before, is halter Rambam with Avazei Pashkin. Aman says the Rabbi Dova Acher. So we're going to see the Taki Mamish Azoi. It's another pshat, legamri another pshat. Avu yesh b'zeh mile afilu legavi that first pshat, which l'chol adayas is pretty amazing, like we've just seen. Ki asisa fele. Ki asisa aleph. In other words, we've turned around the word pele into the word aleph. In other words, in the previous pshat, we were using the word pele as a taish pele, a wonder, adover muvdal mufrash b'ma'alosa. Now we've traded the oasis around and the word pele to the infant aleph. That infant aleph is always indicative of a teaching or a going further, or even in the Aleph Beis. If I say Aleph, then I'm leading into Beis, and that's second what he brings. Umahu Aleph Hotaninan. We learned Aleph Beis. That the infant Aleph leads into Beis. And what is that? Aleph Bino. Aleph Beis literally means bias. What bias is the infant Bino. Bino is more a built and constructed entity. Aleph, meaning the idea of teaching or leading into, that the Aleph leads into Bina. Ava, that's the inyan of the, what you might call the toitzua of what we eventually want. Ava is a diukna da Aleph, or the inyan of the shape or the form of the Aleph, ihu tlasitrin. It's got three, as it were, aspects to it. Not necessarily sides, but more the concept of aspects. Rashis, the rosa iloa, the odom kadmoa. He said that inyan of the infant Aleph is the rashis of the rosa iloa, the odom kadmoa. Now we have to say that when he says rosa iloa the odom kadmoa, then he means the infant chokma da atzilus. It's well known, or chokma how it is bereshis atzilus. It's well known that that's already the infant odom. Atzilus is beklal the infant odom, or in odom guf it's odom kadmoa. And it's well known that odom kadmoa, but beklal is the infant chokma. Yeah, sometimes we say that odom kadmoa is the infant ak. But here he's talking about odom kadmoa is also the infant, but close is the infant muvdul dika oilam. Over here he doesn't mean that. Here he means the infant yoter, the prat. We're talking about the prat of the oisal. Begin the b'diyukna the Aleph, due to the fact that in the shape of the Aleph, ish train droin, there are two arms, chad mikan v'chad mikan. In other words, one at the top of the Aleph and one at the lower part. Chad mikan v'chad mikan v'gufa be'emtzo isa. And in the middle is the guf of the Aleph. V'chule roza chada. It's all one united secret. It's all one united soul. Ubegin kach, and due to that fact, Aleph chushban echad. That if you just write a Aleph and you just see a Aleph, then a Aleph means one. not that the word aleph is, but the three oisias is b'chushpan echad. What it means is that if you just write aleph, then you mean one. In other words, what you might call the gematria of aleph is one. V'hainu, he says, ki osisa fele adkal. He said, up to here is the quote from the Zohar. So says the Rebbe, what is the kilo de chiddush? So we have to say that the chiddush is that prior to that we were talking about the ina osisa fele, the ina from pele mamish. We're talking about the two madrigas in Pele, the Ina from Keser, and how Chochmah is Kilu, a face to the Ina from Keser. Chochmah Stima. However, immediately the Zohar changes it from Pele into Aleph, then that means that we're going down now. Up to now we've been talking about Pele, how it's Oile legavi the Ina from Keser. Now we're talking about the Ina from Pele, how it's becoming Aleph, the Hainu, the Tzadayah, Yerida, as it were. In that gufa, there's this whole shape of the aleph, well, that's different ways, or three different oifanim, or three different aspects of the whole general tnua of how it's going to get down into the inyan of Chochmah Geluya in Olam HaAtzilus. Mashu Oma Dova Acher, Hainu Mishum Dekan Mefarish, Mashu Kosu Ki Asisa Fele Boiven Acher. It's a different pshat. The hinel of pirush arishan harimasha chokma nikra pele hu mipnei shehu kisuya ulavusha lislab shelena heiras timoa. Dahainu mipnei shemalbeshes umalemes akeser. Like we saw, not b'derech lavush. Even though he uses the word malbeshes, he doesn't mean b'derech lavush, like we saw the whole ariches, and we just discussed it again b'ariches. That's the inyan of the aliyah. Yeah, v'yishparish ha'inyan b'chinas chokhmah stimoa shehi b'chinas stimas v'helem. Misalem bo oyer hakesah. Afilu the inyan v'oyer hakesah is misalem bo. And that's the tzad aliyah klape hakesah. Avo ein ze b'chinas ha'chokhmah mitzad atzmo. Although that's not the immediate inyan of chokhmah mitzad atzmo. The other Chochmah mitzad atzmo, he b'chinas hagilui. Achamayisha kosev Aleph Chochmah, like it's brought down in Mishlei, that I will teach you literally, I will instruct you the inyan of Chochmah. She b'chinas ulpana, v'limud, the Ayin b'chinas hagilui. Dezeh kol b'chinas haChochmah, li'eh b'chinas gilui oya. Amamela said to Rebbe, that what we've been talking up to now, the inyan from Chochmah Stimoa ba'aliyosah, what Chochmah Stimoa is oile ma'alim, becomes a ponym literally, nelam to the inyan of Keser. He said that's not what you might call normal Chochmah. Does it need the normal inyan in Chochmah? Because the normal inyan from Chochmah, b'kol mokim, is gilui. Like it's put down in the Pasuk, Reishis, Chochmah. The inyan of Chochmah is a Reishis. And it's well known in Rashi at the beginning of the Chumash that Reishis is always the beginning of a something. Reishis is the beginning of a, like Rashi says, Reishis has to have something that's running into it. What's Bereis? It doesn't make sense. It has to be Reishis, Mamlechas Yoyakim, or Reishis something. Because the inyan from Reishis is always the beginning of a inyan. The idiom why the Eibishter made that Kaviyova, that Lavusha al Tainu with the Council Indian, because he wanted there should be, ultimately speaking, the Indian from Gilui. Because from Helem Alain, you're not going to get the Ganze Kavanah. The whole Kavanah is going to eventually be that there's got to be a talking to another entity. The word Gilui means exactly that. Gilui means that you're expressing and you're being shining and you're talking to another entity. The first pshat that we bought, that's part of that. But that's part of that how he's playing within himself. We're thinking of an amazing beer that inside the Dias Atzmei, your Deus calling him to, is also the beginning of that play. The Kaviyom, the Eibusha knows everything without your Dias Atzmei. I'd have to show me your Dias Atzmei also know. Whatever when he makes all these inyanim kilu b'toy himself, sense miyuchad with the atzmas, well, that's all the beginning of going out, that there should be eventually an Asinus Mokim. So all that is still out Teich Atzmusay. And I know that Chochmah, which is like the Kisuya and the new ponim to the Indian Faneinig, well, that's a beginning that eventually there should be, but it's still B'Teich Atzmai. And it's still in the infant Oining. That's what he's going to say, that Oining is still the infant Kiyot, Dveikis Valiyah B'Teich Atzmai. But in that Kufa, it's the ponim which is leading Klape Mata. Now he's talking about the Hebrews are taking the big step forward, that Asisa, and Asisa is like Asuya, even for new reader, Asisa Elef. Now you've made an Aleph out of all that you made this wondrous Kilu Hishtalvet within your own etzem. Well, now you're going to be able to go over to make this whole new Hishtalvet, and that's Kilui. And Chochmah is the beginning of that whole process. And eventually we're going to start, we're talking to some other entity. And then eventually we're going to produce a Malchus Tatzilus, which will bring that entity, go in a drastic oifen, and then Kaviyachal, the Eivus, will talk to that entity. And that's, Ayin, which is the Gamrei, the ability to understand. And that's what he says in some of over there, that ultimately speaking, the whole Indian, the Bria is how they call it, what does he call it over there, in the first parak of Samavov, that's completely and utterly Lamaila Mitamva, Lamaitamba does, Nisave HaKodesh Baruch Hu Liyas Lo Yedira B'tach, it's a Inen from Kasha from Maisa, it's a Inen from, how do you call it, Taiva, of a Taiva's kind, of Taiva's kind Kashi. So, but Bentayim, we've still got the, what you might call the higher part of the Kashi, how it's all happening within him. So, now we have the Dova Acher. So we're going to see there's an amazing mile in the Dova Acher, that eventually, that's eventually what carries out the ultimate Kavanah, that there should be the entity of who we're talking to. And in order to begin now, you've got to have the entity of Gilui, you've got to have the Musik of Gilui. So he said, that's what we're now saying, that the Indian from Pele is not Pele, it's Aleph. It Kilo switches around in itself now, and it takes on a new Kivun, and it becomes revelation. And it's an Indian, that's going upwards. The embassy Indian of Chochmah and the Kavanah in Chochmah, and the original Kavanah, and having made that whole Indian from Chochmah Stimoya, that it's Malbeshes Alinian Akesa, was in order to get to this. Oh, but that's not the embassy Indian, what he meant with Chochmah in its own right. It was all kilo a form of Chochmah in order to get to what we really mean with Chochmah. The Adarabah Chochmah mitzad atzmai. By its definition, the Indian from Chochmah, he begins Gilui. It's the Indian going out and revealing to a entity. I will teach you. She begins upana l'limud Gilui. Dezehu kol begins a Chochmah liyes. Begins Gilui Oyev. Okamei benefesh are rachis a Gilui who kecha Chochmah. In other words, before kecha Chochmah you don't have anything. All you've got is complete helam. Like we see sometimes when the man is faced with a kasha and he doesn't understand, he just waits. But then we brought before Ishteiman, it's an aliyah into the Shurish of Chochmah. And that's why it is that it's painful when there's a mention like that, he's Batzah, we're going now into the whole Shurish of everything, which is Oining. Well, at the minute he gets that, boom, and all of a sudden he gets the Nasina from the Etzem into Gilui, oh, yes, and he comes, it's Lichtikan and Levitic. In other words, he lives with a whole new Indian of Oinig. Where are we? Benevish Hare Rishis Gilu Kecha Chochmah, Da Gilui who Prinsa Pnimi Davke, who Kecha. In other words, Pnimi means that we want eventually to come down and enter the entity. We want to make him a whole entity that he ought to be Mamish Amakabel. What that's the idea of Gilui. That there's a makabel to the Indian, well, that's the Indian of their Pnimi. And therefore, the Yosid, the Indian of the Pnimi will be a medium for the Atzma. Or not that the Pnimi will be misbattled. Some people misunderstand it. It's not the title of the Yosid, the Makif will be mislavish in in the kelim, and there won't be anything on with the makim. No, the panima will be, and the panima will be the, as it were, the keli, or they'll be like two inyonim shovim almost, that the atim will be miskala together with the panimi. Because since the panimi did the job, as you might, that she's not going to get lost, because the panimi is the ultimate tachlis of everything. And the gilu hu b'chinas panimi davke hu koecha Achokma, Dahari Tainug, Upkinus Helem. Oh, the Amazon of Tainug is Helem, Ukidua, Efresh Pain Tainug, the Simcho, Upkinus, Ugilui, Yehu, Minasoge, Dafke. Because what is a soge? When a mensch got it, when it became a part of him, it became his gale, even to him as a limited being. The Soge Dafke. Avo Tainug, Ubehelem. Well, that's what we said. The way it is in Oinig, it's still behelem. Kasher atainu miskale harazo isa aliyah v'sil. If it's mamish emes Oinig, then that draws everything. Fakir draws everything back into everything. Yeah? Even that chorvestimo goes back with it. He said, "Dezo gam is a betainu hameish v'sanefesh." We say tainu is meish v'sanefesh. He said, "Shehu atainu de el yosher." Even that is really good. I mean, even siluk barichas. But kolstein betainuk doer choizer, where it's a tainuk, which by every definition it's going back. So was it a tainuk when you have a tainuk from oyer yosha? In other words, it has been a direct gilui of oyer oinik into the. Why is it called meishav as an hefesh? Because it, as it were, draws you back. Out of yourself, doesn't it? And even our oinig, which comes b'derech oyer yosher, comes b'derech gilui milmaila mata, then that causes in you. But that's what you might call, to use an expression, that's a vochatika oinig. That's a, how do you call it, a vochatika oinig? Yeah, in other words, you get a tremendous oinig in mitten the rinan, as they say, in the middle of an ordinary weekday, and you get this tremendous. Or a hoshiv v'sanefesh, you feel tremendous. Why do you feel tremendous? Because you, as it were, you're lifted up and you're elevated into a state of manuch, not shy to garnish. That's basically what it means. What does it mean? Kol shkeinin and oyer ha'chayzeh. It's brought down at Erev Shabbos, that begins the aliyah and the rita from Milmata Lamayla of all the inyanim, the being the ganze Woch. It begins in from chazorah, elamoker, well that's a vada in from noinig. Then you just go up into Stauches mehr mit Ziesle Legamre, but das ist die Ine von der Teine gewoel Chäuser. But you know the story with Beis when he went to visit the Heilige Jerusalem, from the Maas, it was a given. And he had a Yetzer Tov, I don't know what call it, Yetzer Hara, I suppose. Beis that maybe might even stay by the Revelation in the ganze Maas. He had an attraction to the Heilige Jerusalem, and he went back and told us someone about it. You guys are not informed. Anyway, whatever, when he came there, it was Friday, and the Heilige Jerusalem said that since it's a very urgent matter that he came to tell him, Bishlichus from the Tzemel Tzedek, that even though it's Friday, he'll be in Gabel here. So they sat and they were talking. I think Rabbi Zichron was he was accompanied by somebody else. It was I don't know when the Grace of Sidim was together with him. And at the beginning, the truth is that the Heilige Jerusalem, he wasn't kokak maskim on some of the things that he said. He had his own approach to the Indian. He was about to tell them what his approach was, and then he looked at the clock and he saw it was a certain time, but it's already becoming this man or Milo or whatever. Again, he said he didn't need the clock for that. But anyway, so he didn't glance at the clock. He just looked in that direction, and all of a sudden he decided it was a time for he had to be making the satzmah the Kabbalah's Shabbat. So he just started going up. As they say by Superman, up and away. $1 So they were sitting there, and they thought they were conversing with him, and suddenly they just see that they're talking with an entity it's not there anymore. And he just kept going up, and they became more and more unexpressive and unaware of the fact that they were there. And later on, somehow or another, they managed to get out of the room. So I managed to apologize. I was what happening with him, and they asked the boy, what happened? Something that's kind of unusual. He said, "Oh, that's the beginning of the Aliyah, the Kabbalah Shabbos. That's the beginning of the Chayza." I don't know exactly what the language he used. Oh, that's what happens on the Erev Shabbos. You don't go back in on even the Chayza. That's the time of the things returning back to you. But that's Zicha a time of Histalkes. He said, even the time of an Oyer Yoshua where you feel very fulfilled, he said, even that is also a form of Histalkes. Yeah, he said, Harei, Ayin ze Gilui Adayin. In other words, even though it's the beginning of the ultimate purpose of Gilui, or it is an Ish Mamish Goli, because it's all Kaviyach, like we said, it's all nuances in the Etem. Tainuga Aposhet B'Teich Etem. And the whole Inyan of the Chochmas Timur is also the beginning of the face of that, how it is inside the Etem. He said, where do you get the Gilui? He said, you get the Gilui from the other side of it. Dova Acher, that you turn the pillar into an olive and you start working downwards. He said, then you get to the Inyan of that Chochma, how it becomes a Shorish of Chochma Gluya. The Rotzen, I might say, well, Rotzen is Inyan from running downwards, it's the Inyan from Gilui. Rotzen, we said, Upins Marutza, Emes, Shuam Shocheve, Gilui, ain't no Hanami, so why don't I say that the beginning of all Gilui is Rotzen? So he says, Harene Eino Pnimi. He said, Rotzen is taka form of Gilui, but it also Gilui Etzem. And remember, Rotzen brings with it all the Ramams of the Etzem, and the Pele doesn't know what hit it. The opinion, I'm sorry. The opinimi, to use an expression, doesn't know what hit it. In other words, when you have an emes of Rotzen, then all the credit to say, we can't do anything. So, in the Fara said the Rebbe emes Rotzen is Natiyas Ha'etzem, but it's not Gilui. For Gilui is Pnimi. In other words, we go inside a Makabel, we enter into when we light him up. This is the Pnimi. He said, I'm sorry, Rotzen and Nishboifen goes there. Rotzen stuckt the whole Pnimi together, stuck the whole Keli with everything together. And therefore he says, Reishis HaGilui, Hukinas Pnimi, Hukeach HaChochma. Amamela, Kamei Kein Hulamayla, the Hukinas HaChochma, Chochma Gluya, Hukinas HaGilui. Ukiyadua HaChochma Nikra Oyer, Kamei Shikosev, Vaihi Oyer, Do Nohera Kad Moa. You know, Chochmat Atzilus is called Nohera Kad Moa. Yeah, the beginning of the yeah, how they call it, the previous oil, the oil which is Kad Moa. What does it mean?
There's a glue on it, the glue what's on, the glue Chochma. What's the difference?
No. The Inyan from Rotzen is a Maki. We're touching the Emes Inyan from Gilui. The immediate musik of Gilui is where you enter into the Kli and you light up the Kli. In other words, that Emes, we just admitted that the Inyan from Rotzen was a form of Gilui. It's what we call it's a form of, but it's Inyan from Marutza. But why is it not Gilui? Because the Makabel doesn't know what hit him. And the Inyan from Gilui is when you are Meskalet to the Makabel. And that's what we're trying to point out the whole time. That the whole point of this Inyan inside the Atmas is eventually to get to the Makabel. If we want to get to somewhere, and you will be Aleph, Russian opener. You'll be teaching the Makabel something. You'll be lighting him up and giving him something.
Well,
and that's not there in the Inyan from
Chochma. A mensch is Onik sometimes?
It's not there in the Inyan from in Rotzen, that's an Ishto.
I mean, a mensch has got an Onik. Is Onik by mensch is Onik good for me?
I mean, a Gimel?
Onik.
What about it?
By mensch. The story of the Kai. A mensch sometimes has Onik. Is the glue Onik by mensch?
Yeah. But you see, what we're saying is that Oinig is a hergish. He feels Oinig. But it's a nish Gilui. When you get Oinig, yeah, you go back into you oil it back into yourself. And that's what he said. That the Inyan von Oinig is goyim the Inyan von Siluk in the koiches. And therefore, always say that a mensch has Oinig when he has Chochma. Yeah? So there's two inyonim, like we said. The first of all, that appears, he says, ooh, that's the beginning of something to him, but then he goes into a state of aliyah v'istalkus. He doesn't know what he got. He's in a state of hevdel min hamatzias. And there's a whole work and a whole shaila in the pnimis advarim. How do we get that down, that he should really be able to have it begolen? You follow? And that's because it's a dayin, a chelik from the time. Therefore, it's not the emissary, of Gilui, but it's a beginning of Gilui in the sense that there's an oil. And that oil is eventually going to be Meir, the Keli. That's good to say.
And they say Hakmas Ad and Torah Ponlav. Hakmas Ad.
That's another thing.
And that's when
we will just know that Hakmas Ad Torah Ponlav means that the tainu is so much a chelik of the etzem that it lights up even the chitzeni. It's so much part of the etzem. On the contrary, the oinig is the etzem. Whatever lights up the whole etzem. Over the inum from Gilui Shebedova is the oil that came there, and that's really shaykhle mata. That's what he says. Elef bina. It's really going to go mata into the keli. Therefore, that's the whole ufta. That Gilu is for the Mekabel. Oinig and Rotzen, they are isgalus of the atzmas. They just push the Mekabel in a very delicate way. Although the Gilu to the Mekabel is oil, and oil is meir into the keli. And prior to that, it's not oil. That's what the Zohar Kodesh said. That prior to that, lav inun nohoirin. You've got things that we call oil, but they're not really oil. Okay, good guys. So there we are. Ad Masai. Okay, guys. Who's your time? I have to